Are you ready to escape the noise of the day and embrace a world of calm and comfort? Welcome to Calm and Cozy Bedtime, where every story takes you on a peaceful journey, gently guiding you toward a restful night's sleep. Tonight we venture to a small, picturesque village by a crystal clear lake, a place where time seems to pause and every moment feels like a warm, heartfelt embrace. Nestled among gentle rolling hills, this little haven offers the perfect escape from the rush of daily life. Our story follows Ethan, a young writer struggling to reignite his creative spark. Feeling drained and uninspired, he travels to the serene village of Lakeview in search of peace and clarity. But what he doesn't expect is how this enchanting place will offer him not just inspiration, but friendship, joy, and unexpected connections that could change his life forever. So, snuggle up under your favorite blanket, let your body relax, and allow a wave of tranquility to wash over your mind. Together, let's step into this heartfelt tale, where every word is like a gentle breeze carrying you closer to dreams. Ready? Let's begin. Ethan was a young, promising writer who once carried a vivid imagination and an unstoppable drive to create. But after months of endless drafts, sleepless nights, and looming deadlines, he felt as though he had lost himself. His creative spark had dulled, replaced by exhaustion and frustration. What had once been his passion now felt like a burden. Desperate for clarity and renewal, he decided to take a break from the relentless pace of city life. His friends had spoken fondly of Lakeview, a peaceful village by a sparkling lake, calling it a sanctuary for weary souls. Ethan decided to see for himself if this place could offer the escape he so desperately needed. The train ride to Lakeview was the first moment of peace Ethan had experienced in months. As the cityscape gave way to rolling hills and lush greenery, he felt his shoulders relax. With every mile that brought him closer, the noise of his overactive mind began to fade. By the time he arrived at the small, charming station, he was greeted by a breeze so fresh it seemed to carry away the lingering weight of his troubles. Stepping off the train, the first thing that struck Ethan was the air. It was crisp, clean, and carried the faint scent of pine and wildflowers. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let the moment wash over him. For the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel the pressing weight of his deadlines or the chaos of the city. It was as though the village itself had whispered, "Welcome home." Lakeview unfolded before him like a dream. The village seemed almost untouched by time, a perfect blend of natural beauty and simple, rustic charm. Small wooden cottages with flower-filled window boxes lined the cobblestone streets, their sloped roofs dusted with moss. Towering trees, their branches heavy with green foliage, provided shade to the narrow pathways that wound through the village like veins of serenity. As Ethan walked through the village, he let the scenery soak into his weary soul. The soft crunch of cobblestones underfoot, the distant hum of laughter from a group of children playing near the lake, and the occasional wagging tail of a friendly dog made the village feel alive yet soothing. Every corner revealed another postcard-perfect view. A wooden bridge arching over a gentle stream, a garden bursting with vibrant sunflowers, and a small bakery emitting the warm scent of freshly baked bread. At the heart of the village was the lake itself. It was as mesmerizing as his friends had described, perhaps even more. The surface of the water shimmered like emeralds under the soft sunlight, rippling gently in the breeze. The trees that framed the lake stood tall and still, as if guarding its beauty. A few rowboats were moored near the shore, their reflections dancing on the pristine water. Birds flitted from branch to branch, their melodies harmonizing with the rustling leaves to create a symphony of peace. Ethan couldn't help but pause as he reached the lake's edge. He dropped his bag to the ground and simply stood there, staring at the tranquil scene before him. He felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in months. It was a sense of hope, fragile yet comforting. It was as though the village, with all its quiet charm and unassuming beauty, had reached out to him and whispered, "This is where you can begin again." After a few moments, Ethan picked up his bag and headed toward the cottage he had rented for his stay. It was a charming little home, with white walls, blue shutters, and a small porch overlooking the lake. The inside was cozy, with wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and shelves lined with books. It felt like a place made for reflection and creativity, a sanctuary for someone like him. As he unpacked his belongings, Ethan couldn't help but feel a strange sense of belonging, even though he had only just arrived. He stepped onto the porch and looked out at the lake again, watching as the sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the water. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore, the distant laughter of villagers, and the chirping of crickets created a lullaby of peace. In that moment, Ethan made a quiet promise to himself. He would let go of the pressure he had carried for so long. Here in Lakeview, he would focus not on deadlines or expectations, but on rediscovering the joy of writing and the beauty of life itself. For the first time in months, he smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. Lakeview, he thought, was not just a place to visit. It was a place to heal, to grow, and to begin again. That afternoon, Ethan decided to take a leisurely walk around the lake to immerse himself in his new surroundings. The soft golden sunlight bathed everything it touched, painting the landscape in a warm, serene glow. The gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze and the faint ripple of water along the shore created a soothing symphony that seemed to whisper, "Take your time. You're home." As Ethan strolled through the village, the inviting aroma of coffee wafted through the air. It drew him toward a small cafe tucked in the corner of the village square. The cafe's wooden sign, hand-painted with a simple yet elegant script, read "Martha's Haven." Colourful flower pots adorned the windowsills, their vibrant blooms swaying gently as if to welcome him inside. "Good afternoon," a cheerful voice greeted Ethan as he stepped through the door. The voice belonged to Martha, the cafe's owner, an elderly woman with sparkling eyes and silver hair tied neatly into a bun. She wore a soft cardigan and had an air of warmth about her that made Ethan feel instantly at ease. Ethan ordered a cup of hot coffee and found a cozy corner to sit in. The cafe was small but filled with charm, shelves lined with books, a crackling fireplace, and the soft hum of jazz playing in the background. When Martha brought over his coffee, its rich aroma wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. "This is your first time in Lakeview, isn't it?" Martha asked, her kind eyes twinkling. Ethan nodded. "Yes, I arrived this morning. I needed a break from, well, everything." Martha smiled knowingly. "You've come to the right place. Lakeview has a way of helping people find what they didn't even know they were looking for." Over the next half hour, Ethan learned more about Lakeview from Martha. She shared tales of the village's long history, the close-knit community that called it home, and the simple joys that filled their everyday lives. She spoke of seasonal festivals by the lake, moonlit boat rides, and the laughter that echoed through the village square during summer evenings. "You'll find that life moves slower here," Martha said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "It gives you time to listen, not just to others, but to yourself." Ethan found himself captivated, not just by her stories, but by the sincerity in her words. He felt as if she truly understood the wariness he carried, even without him saying much. As he finished his coffee, Martha added, "If you need inspiration, don't just look for it. Let it find you. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet moment." Ethan left the cafe feeling lighter. Martha's words lingered in his mind like the fading scent of her freshly brewed coffee. He knew he had chosen the perfect place to begin anew. Continuing his exploration, Ethan wandered through the cobblestone streets, marveling at the beauty of the village. As he turned a corner, the rhythmic sound of hammering caught his attention. Curious, he followed the noise to a small wood shop nestled under the shade of a massive oak tree. "Come on in, young man," a gruff yet welcoming voice called out. Ethan stepped into the shop and was greeted by the sight of an older man surrounded by tools, planks of wood, and works in progress. The air smelled of sawdust and pine, a scent that felt both earthy and comforting. The man introduced himself as Thomas, a skilled carpenter who had spent decades perfecting his craft. His hands were thick and calloused, evidence of years spent shaping wood into art. Around the shop, Ethan saw finely crafted furniture, wooden sculptures, and even a half-finished rowboat propped against the wall. "Everything here has a story," now Thomas said as he carefully carved intricate details into the backrest of a chair. "My job is to bring that story to life." Ethan watched in fascination as Thomas worked, his movements deliberate and precise. The wood seemed to come alive under his skilled hands, transforming from an ordinary plank into something meaningful and beautiful. "Why did you choose woodworking?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Thomas paused, a smile spreading across his face. It wasn't so much a choice as it was a calling. Wood has a way of speaking to you if you're willing to listen. Every grain, every knot, it's all part of its journey. My job is to honor that journey. Ethan felt a connection to Thomas's words. As a writer, he had always believed that stories existed everywhere, waiting for someone to uncover them. Watching Thomas work reminded him of the beauty of creation, the joy of bringing something new into the world. The two men talked for what felt like hours. Thomas shared stories of the village, tales of the lake's ever-changing moods, and memories of the people who had passed through his shop over the years. "There's something special about this village," Thomas said, his voice soft yet firm. "It has a way of reminding you what really matters. It's not about deadlines or achievements. It's about the connections we make, the things we create, and the peace we find along the way." Ethan left the woodshop with a newfound sense of inspiration. The conversation with Thomas had stirred something within him, a reminder of why he had started writing in the first place. It wasn't about meeting expectations or chasing recognition. It was about telling stories that mattered, stories that could touch hearts and bring people together. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the village, Ethan walked back to his cottage. He felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet yet powerful assurance that he had found not just a place to rest, but a community to belong to. Martha's wisdom and Thomas's passion had shown him that even in the smallest corners of the world, there were stories waiting to be discovered. And perhaps in this little village by the lake, Ethan would find not just his inspiration, but also himself. In the days that followed, Ethan gradually fell into the gentle rhythm of life in Lakeview. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic hustle of the city. Here, mornings were not a blur of alarms and rushing out the door. Afternoons weren't filled with emails and deadlines, and evenings weren't stolen by endless scrolling or stress-filled thoughts. In Lakeview, time seemed to stretch, allowing him to savor each moment. Each morning, Ethan woke up to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through his cottage window. The lake shimmered under the early light, and the air carried the crispness of dawn, tinged with the earthy scent of pine. Rising from bed, he'd step onto the grass outside his cottage, barefoot, letting the cool dew awaken his senses. His mornings began with a quiet yoga session by the lake's edge. With every stretch and pose, he let the sound of lapping waves and birdsong guide his breath. The routine wasn't just exercise, it was a way to center himself, to remind him of the tranquility he was here to embrace. After his morning routine, Ethan would head toward the village square. The cobblestone paths, lined with wildflowers and shaded by towering trees, felt like a pathway into another world, a world where life moved at its own unhurried pace. The square came alive during market days, bustling with villagers setting up stalls filled with colorful produce, hand-woven textiles and jars of homemade preserves. The vibrant chatter of locals bartering, laughing and sharing news created a lively backdrop that Ethan found oddly soothing. Martha often met him there, always with a warm smile and a playful invitation. "Come on, Ethan, let's find the best apples in the village today." The market wasn't just about food, it was a feast for the senses. Bright red tomatoes glistened with morning dew. Bunches of fresh herbs exuded their earthy aroma, and baskets of ripe berries tempted passers-by with their vibrant hues. Ethan found himself enchanted by the simplicity of it all. "You see," Martha said one morning as she picked out a bundle of fresh basil, "a good meal doesn't need to be fancy. Just fresh ingredients, a little care, and someone to share it with. That's all it takes to make a memory." Ethan often helped Martha carry her purchases back to her cozy kitchen, where she'd whip up simple yet delicious meals. They'd talk about everything: her memories of the village, Ethan's struggles with writing, and life's little joys. The time spent cooking and eating together became some of Ethan's favorite moments in Lakeview. The afternoons were Ethan's sanctuary. With the sun high in the sky, he'd often borrow a kayak from a friendly villager and head out onto the lake. Paddling across the still water, surrounded by the gentle embrace of nature, felt like stepping into a dream. The lake was a living mirror, reflecting the sky's endless blue and the swaying trees that framed its edges. Ethan would often pause his paddling, letting the kayak fill-ins. The occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface, or the call of a distant bird, only emphasized the stillness. One afternoon, as Ethan floated in the middle of the lake, he noticed an elderly couple sitting on a bench by the shore. They sat in companionable silence, their hands intertwined, watching the ducks glide across the water. The simplicity and beauty of the scene struck Ethan deeply. It reminded him of the kind of connections he wanted to write about, the quiet, enduring moments that often went unnoticed but held profound meaning. As the sun began to set, bathing the village in golden light, Ethan would return to his cottage. Evenings in Lakeview were a time of quiet reflection. He'd light a fire in the stone fireplace and settle into the worn armchair with a cup of tea or cider. Sometimes he'd write in his journal, letting his thoughts spill onto the pages without judgment or direction. Other times, he'd read one of the old books he'd found on the shelves in his cottage. The stories felt timeless, much like the village itself, and he found solace in their words. Thomas would occasionally stop by, his presence as warm and grounding as the firelight. He'd bring a flask of spiced apple cider and sit across from Ethan, sharing stories that were as rich as the drink in their hands. "Did you know," Thomas said one evening, his voice carrying a hint of mischief, "that the lake is said to have a spirit? They say it protects the village, ensuring that those who come here with an open heart always leave with a piece of its magic." Ethan chuckled, but couldn't deny that Lakeview felt magical. Whether it was the people, the place, or the peace he'd found, something about it had begun to change him. Over time, Ethan noticed a shift within himself. The creative block that had plagued him for months began to lift. His notebook, once filled with scribbles and unfinished ideas, started to overflow with words. Inspiration seemed to find him in the most unexpected places. In the gentle rhythm of paddling on the lake, in the laughter of children playing in the square, and in the way the sunlight filtered through the trees. It wasn't just the act of writing that felt different. It was his perspective. He no longer felt the need to chase perfection or meet expectations. Instead, he focused on capturing the beauty of the everyday moments that had begun to fill his life. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his cottage, watching the moonlight ripple across the lake, Ethan picked up his pen. The words flowed effortlessly, each one carrying the peace and clarity he had found in Lakeview. He realized that Lakeview wasn't just a place, it was a lesson. A reminder that life's greatest joys often came not from grand gestures, but from the quiet moments of connection and reflection. As the fire crackled inside and the lake shimmered under the stars, Ethan closed his notebook and smiled. For the first time in a long while, he felt whole. And he knew, deep down, that his time in Lakeview had not only restored his creativity, but also his sense of self. As the day of his departure drew near, Ethan felt a heaviness in his heart. Lakeview had been more than just a temporary escape. It had become a second home, a place where he rediscovered not only his creativity, but also a deeper connection to himself and the world around him. On his final morning, Ethan took one last walk around the lake. The water sparkled under the rising sun, as calm and serene as the first day he arrived. He let the sights, sounds, and smells of the village etch themselves into his memory, a treasure trove of peace and inspiration to carry with him. At the cafe, Martha waited to say goodbye. She handed him a small wooden box wrapped with a simple ribbon. Inside was a jar of her homemade jam and a handwritten note. "Always carry a piece of Lakeview's peace with you. Promise me you'll visit again," Martha said with a warm smile. "Lakeview will always have a place for you." Later, Thomas met Ethan by the dock. In his hands, he held a small wooden boat, its craftsmanship intricate and precise. The smooth curves and detailed carvings reflected Thomas's love for his craft. "This is for you," Thomas said, placing the boat in Ethan's hands. A reminder that no matter how rough the waters get, you have the strength to navigate through them. Ethan was deeply moved by their gestures. He realized that Lakeview had given him more than a respite. It had given him relationships, wisdom, and a renewed sense of purpose. As Ethan left the village, his bags were heavier, not with belongings, but with the lessons and memories he'd gathered. The stillness of the lake, the warmth of the villagers, and the simple joys of life had transformed him. He knew he wasn't the same person who had arrived, weary and cared back in the city. Ethan felt a newfound clarity and strength. The noise and chaos of urban life no longer overwhelmed him. He carried with him the quiet confidence and serenity he had found in Lakeview. At his desk, he opened his notebook, and the words poured out effortlessly. This time, his stories weren't just about faraway places or fantastical adventures. They were about the beauty of human connections, the power of nature, and the magic of finding peace in simplicity. As he wrote, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He would return to Lakeview, not just to visit, but to give back to the place that had given him so much. And until that day came, he would carry its lessons with him in every story he wrote and every moment he lived. For now, the wooden boat sat on his desk, a quiet reminder of Lakeview's enduring presence in his life. No matter where the journey took him, Ethan knew that part of his heart would always remain by the lake, in the little village that had changed him forever.